As Malaysia continues to refine its housing delivery system, the Build Then Sell BTS model has re-emerged as a key policy considerations under the 30th Malaysia Plan. The Ministry of Local Government Development KPKT has proposed a phased implementation of BTS, aiming to address long-standing issues such as abandoned housing projects and to strengthen consumer protection. Unlike the conventional sell then build (STB) approach, BTS requires developers to complete construction before collecting the bulk of payment from buyers, a potentially safer and more transparent process for home ownership. However, this shift also raises questions about developer viability, financing mechanism and market affordability. Joining us today is Sulaiman Saheh, Director of Research and Consultancy Services at Rahim Co International, Sedang Berhad. Thank you very much, Sulaiman, for joining me. As we can see that a few of the reports are also showing that we can see that the high transaction, we can see more sell housing in Selangor and in Kuala Lumpur. But to start us off within the conversation, maybe you can explain what the Build Then Sell BTS model is and how it differs from the conventional sell then build SCB approach used in Malaysia today.
Good morning. Nice having you here to actually share my thoughts here today. On BTS, or Build Then Sell, versus the existing system that we all know, which is actually Sell Then Build, which is STB. The difference is when you actually have a property, a single property, right now in Malaysia, we employ or deploy the system of Sell Then Build, which means that developer would actually sell the property to the buyers, where they actually sign a sale and purchase agreement, arrange the financing, and pay pay the payment for the house as the transaction progresses as you go along. What BTS, or Build Then Sell, is where the developer would actually sell the property only after the property is actually built, which means that they would actually have to build the property first, raise up their own funds, raise up their capital, build the building until completion, and only then the property is being sold to the buyers. Hence, eliminating the risk of uncertainty, how's the property going to look like, whether the quality is okay or not. People can actually see the property as it is already completely built with the CCC, or Certificate of Compliance, where buyers would then be more secured and hence reducing the risk of buying a project that runs the risk of being abandoned and being stuck with an abandoned property. That is basically the BTS versus STB, the Build Then Sell versus Sell Then Build.
And that is to help us understand between these two approaches. And the government KPKT, specifically under the 13th Malaysia Plan, or as we call it, RMK 13, has raised the idea of making BTS compulsory in phases. From your view, what have been the triggers in Malaysia for this renewed push? Is it more about consumer protection or a reaction to issues like abandoned projects? Because previously, the government says BTS will help curb abandoned housing projects by 2030. So how realistic is this target, and to what extent can BTS help achieve it versus other reforms?
I would say the primary driver for the BTS concept to be pushed to become mandatory, as it's been proposed right now, is the issue of abandoned projects that we have actually faced. The number of abandoned projects that we have seen over the years constitute to thousands of units, amounting to billions of dollars, billions of ringgit, and affecting thousands of Malaysians stuck with property. They've actually signed a sale and purchase agreement. They can't actually exit from the sale. It's very hard for them to exit from the sale and purchase agreement. Continue to actually pay the banks because some of the banks have actually started disbursing the amount, and hence they are paying funds, but the project is not going to be completed anytime soon or within the foreseeable future. So that problem is the main driver for this BTS being mooted, which then basically explains how the mechanism of BTS being sell only to the buyers after the building has already been completed, which means that buyers are actually protected. There is a bit more consumer protection there, as well as the security of the unit, as well as the quality that you actually get for the particular unit. So that mechanism protects the buyers in that sense. However, we have to also see that with BTS, one of the biggest challenge right now is actually on abandonment. That's the main issue that's being highlighted here. But there's also the issue of affordability. There's also the issue of how the supply chain or the efficiency of supply within the market, which also needs to be looked at, because BTS has its pros, definitely, but it also has its cons, because there's limitations for those who are able to deploy BTS system and those who are really in need to actually use continuously the STB or the sell then build system.
As you mentioned that this is a push that protect mostly the consumers, and under the 1090 BTS concept, buyers would pay 10% upfront and only 90% upon completion and a vacant possession, considering that you say one of the main issues we still have about abandonment, affordability, all the pricing. So which sounds ideal for consumers, but what are the real benefits from the perspective of buyers, developers, and even financiers?
From buyers, the benefit would be it's more secure. They would actually have more confidence within the market. The market generally becomes more transparent. And these are all ideals within any market, so that the market becomes more sustainable, more dynamic, and therefore more thriving. Yes, it is. The benefit for the developers would be, this would be a developer who can actually ensure that the product that they actually build and sell reflects their original intention, reflects their quality control, reflects their ability to actually deliver what they promise. So those two would actually be beneficial to both those parties. To financiers, when they actually do build then sell concept, the funding is basically given to buyers who already own or already coming to a possession of a completed property, which means that the risk of foreclosure, if it were to have actually happen, the property is actually a completed property that can actually be sold off easily to the next buyer. That's from that sense. But the disadvantage or the weaknesses or the risk with BTS is, due to the developer having to develop the units upfront first, the flow of funds that they actually get in, which all traditionally right now under the sell then build concept, where buyers will actually pay progress payments, that risk is now transferred wholly to the developer. It is actually a business consideration, if you like, for the developer as a business would actually bear the risk. But because we as a community, as the whole market is already used to the system of sell then build, and the mechanism that actually allows the developer to do the current pricing model using the sell and build, that may change because cost of funds, holding costs for the developer, raising capital, financing costs for the project finance would actually be higher, which then needs to be addressed. And this is where the government, should we actually deploy BTS as a mandatory system within the market, needs to come into support. So that's why the supporting can be done through phased implementation according to the location or according to the sensitivity of the market or the vulnerability of the market, where if there's too much speculative market, maybe we actually do build then sell. If it's a market where it is actually predominantly genuinely strongly driven by owner-occupier within the mass market, within an M40 or V40, this is where probably we sustain with a mixture, a hybrid of sell and build as well as build and sell, to make sure that affordability and pricing of houses would actually still remain manageable, as well as the number of developers who can afford to play their role as a developer, because BTS would require more capital and only the larger developers can actually afford, sieving out some of the smaller developers.
All right, that is some of the real benefits that the buyers, developers and financials should be prepared for. But also you've just shared with us what are some of the risks or potential pitfalls they should watch out for, and maybe some of that they should address it immediately. And for buyers and developers, what supportive measures of safeguards should the government prioritize to make broader BTS transition viable in Malaysia? For example, financing mechanism, long stop guarantees, or even tight adoption BTS for large developers first. What's your thought on this, Sulaiman?
Yeah, the model for BTS, if we were to actually implement it, it must be implemented in a phased manner according to the market capacity, the demand capacity, as well as the supply chain capacity, which is the developers. So when we actually do this, the support would actually be from, because of the foreseeable increase in cost from the developer, or the developer bearing more risk and hence wanting having to actually price the house a bit more higher, that will be compensated if the government can actually give incentives in terms of reduction in premiums, for example, or reduction or discount in terms of the compliance costs, or even incentivizing certain schemes where there's a scheme for credit guarantee for developers who actually facilitate their funding needs. With that system, we can actually give better leeway for the system to actually be implemented. But one thing that we have to actually talk about, you actually mentioned the system BTS right now there's a strict BTS as well as the sell and build. There's also the midway point, which is the 1090. That's one mechanism here, which was actually mooted a few years back, already about 10, 15 years ago. But it's on voluntary basis, and there's not much traction, I have to say, with regards to those schemes. But the 1090 system itself may warrant a bit more investigation. It can be 1090, it can be 2080. There's a leeway that you can actually play around to find a sweet spot that is manageable for the market to actually basically use BTS, hence having a better security or protecting the buyers, as well as allowing the market to still be fluid and dynamic so that the supply chain is not disrupted towards getting a better balance within the market.
Sulaiman, we are at the end of our session. I would like to add one more question for you. Given the trade-offs between buyer protection, developer viability and affordability, what is your outlook for Malaysia's housing delivery future? Will BTS become the dominant model, remain as an optional model, or will we see a hybrid system?
I would say it will be a hybrid system. It will be a hybrid system because Malaysia right now, as opposed to some of the advanced countries, advanced economies, where market is much more matured, who have already deployed the build then sell concept in full, Malaysia is still an emerging nation. We are still developing. It is not just about the home buyers who are actually challenged with the rising home costs or housing costs, as well as stagnant wage increment, but also businesses, because the opportunity here it's a bit different. The market dynamics is different, and hence it's going to be a hybrid between BTS and STB. It's going to be more pragmatic in terms of its approach, which we hope the government would actually be very involved and gathering full stakeholders engagement from. Developers is one, buyers is one, the local authority and all the authorities is another, consultants is another, and banks and financial institutions, because all of us would actually play and need to actually play a big role to make sure that the development of the housing market in Malaysia grows sustainably and continue to be thriving.
And what can we learn from countries that have applied this BTS model successfully?
The enforcement is actually of paramount importance, and identifying, monitoring throughout continuously and identifying problems before it becomes a major problem. You see with the task force, the government have actually formed a task force to actually revive certain abandonment projects. From these models, we see that there's white knights and those rescue mechanism is actually implementable, but it costs money and it costs non-financial terms as well to the emotions of all our peers, our home buyers in Malaysia. So the monitoring, enforcement, as well as political will and transparency within the system is actually needed with the support by the government for all this to actually be successful.